Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
Today we're talking about being too honest for my own good, when saying what you really think feels risky, but biting your tongue feels unbearable.
Those moments when your mouth gets ahead of your diplomacy and you say the thing everyone's thinking but weren't supposed to say out loud.
Yeah, this one's for the people who are always told they're too blunt, a bit rude, or could have worded that a bit better, when all they were really doing was being honest.
We'll talk about the line between honesty and harshness, why some of us feel physically unable to sugarcoat things, and the guilt that can come after speaking the truth.
Basically, this one's for the people who can't not say the thing, even when they try.
Let's get into it.
Oh.
This is the first time that we've had an episode suggestion from a listener, which just felt really exciting. So just a shout out to Becky. Thank you for suggesting this one. And I think it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, I agree. I was really excited when you told me that we'd had a suggestion. So yeah, let's see where this one goes.
Yeah, thinking about what it means to be honest, or, well, different words come up for me when I think about this episode. There's honesty, and that makes me think about the inherent values that some of us might have in relation to truth telling and being honest. Then there's directness, which kind of feels similar but has a different edge to it, as well as then bluntness, and where inappropriateness, rudeness kind of falls on that spectrum, really.
Yeah. So I think in the last few years, I've had a few realizations about this, because I think I have been direct. I think I am somebody that can be direct. I think I am someone that can be seen as rude, but almost like I'm only just realizing that some people might see me that way. But also I can hold back from saying anything at all sometimes because I'm worried about upsetting people. So yeah, it doesn't feel as, I think it almost feels like sometimes this can be set up as something clear cut of like, some people are like this and some people are like that. But actually there's kind of a swirl, and also people aren't going to agree on what is okay and what isn't, whether we're thinking about honesty or whether we're thinking about directness or whether we're thinking about bluntness or rudeness. There isn't, I often wish there was some kind of book that would tell us the answer, like what's right and what's wrong. But there isn't. There is no book out there. There is no therapist or guru who can say this is where the line is.
I feel like even if there was a book, would probably disagree with it.
Yeah. So yeah, I wonder how you see yourself when it comes to bluntness, directness, honest.
It's difficult for me to know what to put in what box. I think that's why I started out with naming those different descriptive words for how we might communicate.
Yeah.
So I have lots of different thoughts that relate to each of those words. The first thing coming to mind is when I was first considering the idea that I could be autistic. I was coming across the questions that was, people have told you that you're rude or accused you of being rude or impolite and those kinds of things. And I've never related to any of that. No one's ever accused me of being rude. But it's difficult to know, is that because I am not a rude person? Is that because of masking? Is my inherent way of being a bit rude, but I have been socialized as the good girl to be polite? That kind of, again, I guess masks that. Sometimes there's just these questions that get posed to you, and it's so hard to not come up with a clear-cut answer, because how do you know? Because is rudeness a black and white thing, or is rudeness about perception?
Yeah.
How subjective is it? But in terms of honesty, I highly value honesty. Truth-telling is one of my top priorities in terms of how I am in the world, how I want to be in the world. also how I want other people to be in the world. I kind of expect a same level of honesty back that I give.
Yeah.
And so I know being open and being honest is really important to me. But I do think I'm able to, like you said yourself, hold back.
Yeah.
One of the things I have noticed is I think my natural way of being and speaking is quite direct and is quite blunt, but I think I can filter it. Where or how that filter has developed, I don't know. I don't know whether that filter is the same as everybody else's filter, where everybody has very direct, blunt, rude thoughts and they filter it through a system and then it comes out differently at the other end, or whether some people aren't blunt or direct in their head either, so there's no need to have that filter. And then, of course, people who maybe naturally think that way and then there is no filter and it comes out like that. My sense is being direct is my natural way of being, but I've learned how to filter it because I feel like it gets quite tiring. I feel tired when I think about having to do that. And there's almost a wishful thinking that I wish I could just say things how I want to say things. And actually, my partner would probably tell you that I am quite direct and that I can be blunt because I think I mask less. And for me, they're signs, I suppose, that make me think that this is more related to masking.
Yeah, I think that's where the difference is for me as well. I think when I'm at home, I am more direct. And I think this is where I've had to start to learn. So I think, like you, I also really value honesty. And I know for me, that comes from a background of communication not being straightforward, promises made, but then never followed through on. It feels really important to me to know where I stand. I think we kind of touched on before because you mentioned the quote from the book. I would much rather deal with a painful truth than somebody try and appease me with a lie.
Hmm.
Like that's been, I felt like that right back to being a child. But I think in recent months, recent months, I'd say I've been questioning whether I have tipped into too blunt, especially when I'm distressed.
Okay.
I can be too blunt about things in a way that isn't kind. And that
Hmm.
then cuts across another value of mine, which doesn't feel very nice to admit.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
the image that I want to present of myself. It's not how I want to see it's not how I want to see myself. But I suppose with honesty being such a kind of big value for me, it's really important for me that I'm honest with myself. So when things do come into my awareness, I try as excruciating as it can be sometimes to hold my hands up as quickly as possible and say this, yeah, I'm not behaving how I want to behave here. And maybe I need to
Mhm.
reflect on a bit more.
Yeah. No, I relate to that. Kindness is such a top value for me as well. I think, particularly within my relationship, because there is freedom to just be me, then that kind of gets free reign. And I
Mm.
think sometimes I can say something with me just thinking I'm being truthful or being a bit blunt. And after the words have left my mouth, I think, oh, actually, I don't think that sounded quite. I don't like actually how that sounded coming out
Yeah.
of my mouth.
Yeah.
And it's not something that happens often for me, but I think because I've now got this freedom that I've never had before to just, say things how I want to say things, that at times I am just catching myself where, I don't want to take it that far, actually. I don't think that was quite kind to phrase it in that way. I imagine lots of other people are going to relate to that as well. And nobody likes thinking of themselves in a way that they don't like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose it's something, yeah, I think the challenge for me has been about how can I say the thing that I need to say? Because often what I'm saying is something that I feel like I do need to say. I think where it started for me was about learning more about the purpose of compassion and also thinking for myself about how painful it is to realize things about yourself, that actually you need that compassion as a bit of a cushion, that it can just be too bleak to have to face things about yourself without that compassion piece in there. So when I'm delivering something to somebody else, I know the compassion is there because I have it in my body, but I forget to deliver that with the message.
Right.
So what they get is just the bleak message on its own,
Mm.
rather than, because I know I still love them. I know I'm not judging them. I know I'm not seeing them as less than, or, because of anything that I'm talking about. But what I'd been missing is that without the compassion piece, without the gentleness, they just get landed with this really harsh, confronting, possibly something completely out of their awareness that they,
Mhm.
yeah. So, yeah, that's been a bit of a change for me in the last few months. I think what also felt important for me with this episode is that distinction between healthy directness and bluntness and, honesty, whatever category you want to drop that in. The difference between that and when people can say things that are hurtful and then they just go, well, I'm just being honest. Well, I'm just saying what everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
And
That's just how I am. I
uh,
tell it like it is.
yeah, yeah. But there's a complete disregard for the impact on the other person. So
Yeah.
I really value honesty. I really value directness. Like, I'm fascinated by people that are direct. I look up to people that are direct. I think they're really important people to have in society.
Yeah.
To the people that are going to speak up, that are going to challenge the status quo, that are, that are brave enough to say, this is not okay, or this hurt me, or, whatever. I think that's really important. But yeah, it just felt really, really important to distinguish between, and I don't think we neatly can. I think we're going to kind of keep coming back to this throughout the episode, that there is no neat way to be like, this behavior is okay and this is not okay, because I think it is so subjective that what's right for one person isn't right for another person.
Yeah. And also, what's right for one situation might not be right in another situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is going to be so context dependent. I think that's where I struggle a little bit with this episode, because there's a type of directness that, like you say, I admire, I'm inspired by. And then there's a type of directness that I can bristle up against as well. And so I don't think it's about any of these concepts on their own, but more the way in which those different concepts can manifest and feel, where there's parts of it that we might
Yeah.
like and can accept in ourselves and our way of being. And then there might be parts that we are less keen on, or that we find annoying or bristle up against when we're on the receiving end of that. So
Mhm.
I almost kind of want to caveat this with, when I'm talking about like directness and bluntness, what people might be conjuring up in their mind when they hear those words might be different. And maybe we just
Yeah.
need to name that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm desperately trying to hunt around in my mind for something solid to stand on, to be like, right, okay, this bit's okay and this bit isn't. Because what I was just going to say there was about intent. Maybe this is about intent. Maybe if your intent is good, then that's okay. And if your intent is not good, then that's not okay. But I don't even think it's as simple as that. I think even if you don't intend to hurt somebody, I used to be in a business networking group, and there were some guys in there that would be forever banging on about, oh, offenses taken, not given. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. But yeah, I think so. Even if your intent is not to hurt somebody, it doesn't make for a good relationship to just shrug your shoulders and go, well, that's just how I am.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's something there about values, that actually, if you value directness over good relationships, then that might be the right decision for you, to be as direct as you want all of the time, with little or no regard for how it impacts other people. But I think for most people, there does need to be a balance. And for some people, that's going to come more naturally than others. And I don't think I don't think it comes that naturally to me. I think even recently, I feel like there are times that I'll say things and I genuinely haven't meant them to be rude or to hurt. Like, it's been completely out of my awareness that what I've said could be construed in that way. Yeah, which feels a bit cringy when I think about it. Of like, because I really don't want to be seen in that way. I really care about people and I don't want to harm them. I think just my internal process can be really quite blunt. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you were talking about in with relationships, It comes up a lot in my work with autistic clients in terms of navigating how we naturally are masking, wanting to mask less, be more of our authentic selves, but at the same time, wanting to have and maintain positive relationships. And the differences between what counts as masking versus what counts as working on our communication skills, which every single human being, regardless of your neurotype, can work on. And part of me wonders if one of the reasons I've navigated this okay in life, I think, is because even before I became a therapist, I was studying communication skills without really knowing that's what I was doing and just copying it, which, yes, is a form of masking. And now I'm understanding more about the way in which I just naturally communicate without all of the fluff. The fluff I have to add in extra often. But also, yeah, through training as a therapist, that I have learnt how to communicate with other people in a way that fosters and nurtures relationships and keeps them around. So if we were to just say, well, this is just how I am, everyone just needs to get on board with it, we might find that it's harder to keep and maintain those relationships. But looking back for myself as a child, my sense is that I was quite open and direct. And I think that got squashed or shamed. As you know, my memory is terrible, so I can't bring forth really specific examples. But I think I started out with a strong voice and slowly it got chipped away at and got quieter and quieter and quieter. And within that came the self-monitoring, social anxiety, people please, do the right thing, say it in the right way. That all of that has meant, I think, that them being accused of being too blunt and rude hasn't ultimately ended up being a factor
Yeah.
because of the level of self-monitoring that I've done to make sure that I say things in the right way
Yeah.
to
Okay.
not make people be upset with me.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about the different angles that come into this, it's bringing to mind, firstly, your neurotype and your natural way of communicating in the world, whether it's come from your life experiences, making yourself smaller, shrinking yourself, being less honest and direct as a result of that. And then we have our trauma responses. If you are someone that has experienced trauma in the past, particularly childhood chronic types of trauma, you then may have developed a fawn trauma response where, again, you may be really over accommodating with a huge desire to please other people. And the other aspect that can influence our honesty and directness in the world is our culture and the way in which we've been socialized. And I'm very much thinking here about being a woman and how we are taught to be gentle, polite, agreeable, self-edit, and how that can play a role. So for many people listening, they may relate heavily to this subject, but it may be being influenced by lots of different factors that may have led us all to the same place, but coming from different places.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if class comes into it as well, like the difference between being blunt if you're upper class, middle class, or working class. Yeah, I don't think I had I know we've talked about this before on the people pleasing episode, but I don't think I had that shrinking in quite the same way. That's not to say it wasn't there at all, because it has had a really big impact on me. And I definitely do have that fawning response in some ways. But I think sometimes I just get confused. Like I can remember as a child, so when you were saying there about your childhood, like I was just thinking about my childhood, and I could just remember so many arguments with my mum in particular, where I'd just be so confused about what was going on in the interaction, because I was like, I'm just saying something really straightforward. And I wasn't intending to upset anyone. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I wasn't being like a rebellious teenager or anything like that. Again, I can't think of specific examples. But yeah, I think the biggest feeling for me was confusion. And I still get that occasionally now. And I think this is where I'm saying, like, I'm kind of learning that maybe I need to say things in a particular way sometimes. But it does feel like, I think sometimes it feels like a tightrope as well, because sometimes it feels like people can meet you with, oh, that's rude, or that's direct, or that's whatever, when what they mean is, I don't want to confront the difficult thing that you're saying.
Mhm.
Even if you did say it in a nicer way, or a kinder way or a gentler way, it would be rebuffed. But when you make it more direct, then you're rude. So you can't
Mm.
win. That feels tricky.
Yeah. Society really values niceness, but
Yeah.
then the real, messy, difficult, uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
And because of that, so many of us then do learn to self censor. So then we all get used to living in a society where nobody's doing it. So then when someone steps forth and does do it, it's a bit like, oh, okay, not used to this, shock. But then conversely, research in social psychology shows that people are often reluctant to be completely honest because they overestimate the potential negative consequences of having been honest, and that we can actually afford to be more truthful than what we think. And the recipient of that honesty tends to react less negatively than what us, the truth tellers, anticipate, which is interesting to me reading from a research perspective, because I know for myself and so many people I work with and so many people in my life really fear being invalidated, minimized, dismissed, misunderstood, all of those things. So we avoid the vulnerability of being open and honest, or telling the truth about something in relation to how we feel, because we fear that so much. And we obviously fear that for a reason. It's not just made up or imagined. So I find that research interesting. But at the same time, I can also think of occasions when I've been worried about being open and honest or truthful about something, and I've had that conversation. You think, oh, that went better than I thought that it did. Oh, that person
Mm.
didn't react how I thought that they were going to react.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because I know that I've had conversation, it was a conversation like that that led to the breakdown of my relationship with my mum. Obviously there were many other factors than just a conversation, but ultimately it came to the point where I had to have a conversation, and that left me with the conclusion that our relationship was not going to work out. So there
Mm.
are, and it might not be your mom and kind of leading to estrangement, but it could, honest conversations can lead to the ending of friendships, the ending of relationships, the breakdown of communication with your manager at work and feeling like you need to leave your job. Like they can have big consequences. I think that's important to acknowledge as well. But I think that most of the time, if you've been friends with someone for a long time, or if you've been in a long-term relationship with somebody and they care about you and they love you and they want to be your friend or want to be your partner, or whatever role they play, that most of the time you're going to be able to figure out a way forward that works for both of you,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're working with somebody completely unreasonable that is, rigid in their behavior and will not change anything. That there are often compromises and options, and that's just all part of being in a relationship, isn't it? Having to negotiate and compromise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about our preference for honesty and even directness and bluntness when it feels context appropriate, and also where our way of being may come from, maybe why we value honesty so much, even if we can then struggle with being honest or being over honest, if that's the thing. But why do you think some of us care so much about being perceived as nice instead of honest?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were saying before about how we're socialized and what's acceptable. And yeah, I wonder how it is in other cultures, but I'm just thinking about British culture and almost like there being a link to like stiff upper lip, like almost like don't rock the boat as well. Like
Mm.
we all just kind of live in this nice narrow line where we don't really have feelings and nobody upsets the apple cart. I'm using way too many sayings here to try and explain what I mean. But
If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
yeah, that does get bundled up with being like a gentleman or is it gentlewoman or a lady? Yeah, that yeah, it makes me think about. I don't know if this is going to take us away. I don't know if I'm just trying to shoehorn this bit in, but I suppose it makes me think about parenting and how we raise our children as well. So when my daughter was 5, I was getting her ready for school, and I don't know what I was doing, but she sat on the stairs. I'm doing her shoes, and she just looked at me and she said, "You're annoying me." And I was horrified. And I had therapy later that day and went to my therapist, and I was like, "She doesn't respect me. What am I doing wrong?" And my therapist just said, "She's just giving you information." And that blew my mind. Like, it just never occurred to me that, well, I guess it just never occurred to me that you could be that honest about how you're feeling, which feels a bit contradictory compared to what I was just saying before about having these big arguments with my mum, because I imagine that's the kind of thing that I would have said to my mum and she would have got offended about.
But
But
that's
yeah,
it, isn't it? She would have got offended about. So it was almost like you have learnt that's a thing to be offended about.
yeah,
But
yeah,
actually, in your therapy, it showed you that that's one way to take that behavior, and there are many other ways that you can take that behavior.
yeah, yeah. That actually, it was really important information to have from my daughter,
Yeah.
and that I didn't need to react to it, or that I could calmly respond to it. I didn't have the skills to do that at the time. But yeah, just gave me a completely different perspective on, maybe there's something about power in here as well, actually, as I'm thinking about that. So I'm thinking about other situations in which, you're not supposed to say things, that it would be rude to say things. So I think I get this quite a lot. So I think I have it myself, and I sometimes feel it when I'm working with autistic clients, because my tendency is to be like, what is it that you want to say to your manager or, whoever? What would it be like to say that? And almost like I miss the piece around, actually, that you can't do that in certain companies. It just doesn't work. Yeah, that there are these unspoken power dynamics that I don't really understand, that can be a bit tricky. I remember once when I think I'd requested reduced hours in a job or some kind of change, and it was going to mean that I wasn't going to be available for a particular shift. And as part of this request, it said something like, "So what will the impact be on the rest of the people in the team? And how do you propose that the company handles this impact?" So I think I wrote something like, "It will mean that I'm not available for, I don't know, for example, an evening shift. So other people in the team will have to cover those shifts." And it got reviewed by the big boss man. He had really had a go at me. Like, he thought it was the most outrageous, like, rudest thing ever. And I'm just sat
What?
there like, I don't,
Why?
I get it. Well, I'm glad that's your reaction, because I imagine saying it and you being like, "Well, yes, Alice, because of X, Y, Z." But I still
That's
don't,
just
like,
a
when it,
fact. If you can't cover it, someone else has to cover the
yeah.
shift.
And all I can think is that he was looking for me to word it in a politer way or something. But he really had a go at me, and I was really upset about that, because I didn't want to impact everybody, but I couldn't carry on doing what I was doing because I wasn't well enough at the time. So yeah, that was really humiliating, actually. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it
there is
sounds
something
it.
about power dynamics in all of this
Yeah.
as well. Like, I'm thinking about maybe in the good old days, like, you just had respect just because you held a certain role. And I think
Mm.
maybe that's changing now, that actually you have to earn respect.
Yeah, so that's almost thinking about the changes in open, honest, direct communication in
Mm.
hierarchies where it would have just been an absolute no-no. You can't say that to your boss. You can't say that to your teacher.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, we will,
Yeah.
at least to a greater or lesser extent, and maybe company dependent, but I feel like that maybe comes back to our values in terms of like authority and those hierarchies and power structures, where some
Yeah.
people still value that and wouldn't say certain things to certain people. Whereas, yeah, I've always been anti that. Like, no, you're not better than me.
Mm.
And absolutely, respect has to be earned. Yeah. So your story about, I'm not even going to say directness. You just told a fact. um, but at work, yeah, calls to mind an example for me, which at the time, like, really upset me. But as I've said, I don't do the fluff naturally. I have to add the fluff in later. And so there was an occasion at work where I'd sent an email to a member of staff who was the same sort of level as me, basically asking them to do something. And I got called into my manager's office to talk about it because this person had basically complained about me and this email that I'd sent saying she's not my manager, like she's telling me what to do. And I was so shocked by the fact that, well, firstly, that the person just didn't talk to me if they had an issue with how I'd emailed them in the first place. Like, you can talk to me about that. But yeah, but then that they had gone to a manager about it. And I got so upset because I hate stuff like that. I remember I cried and I went back to review my email. And honestly, there was nothing frigging wrong with it. I'd not put the fluff in because I think it was at the end of my working day. I think I just needed to make sure this person had the information. I actually wasn't telling them what to do. There was a piece of work that needed doing that was her job to do. So I just sent it to her because that's what she does. That's your
Yeah.
job. I've not told you what to do. This is your job. This is what you do. So that's all I'd done. I'd sent a piece of work over to the person that we send those pieces of work over to. And I'd not dressed it up in fluff. My masking ability had run out and I just put it in a very direct way. Here's a piece of work. You need to do it. Thank you. It was still polite.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently too direct, too blunt, not good enough. But that rocked me for ages because I then, even though I'm somebody that like triple checks how I'm wording things anyway, it got out of control then. I was extra checking everything and I was putting little smiley face emojis on the end of what I was saying so that it was coming across in a way that was good natured. Hi, please like me. Don't be mad at me. Yeah, it really affected me from an anxiety perspective. I just suddenly then became quite anxious about how I was wording my emails. And actually, the email was fine.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? And it's so painful. Even though I can't remember like more specific examples, I feel like I can feel in my body like an echo of times where I've seemingly got it wrong. And I'm kind of, I don't know if you can see I'm doing air quotes when I say got it wrong, because I just think it is so subjective. Yeah. And there just is a line. I feel like there must be a line. Please give me a line. I feel like there must be a line between, because I can hear how that was direct and no fluff, but that's not the same as rude.
Yeah.
I feel like rude. Yeah, maybe I'm just going to put a line in. I feel like rude has to have intention.
Yeah.
Because I think you can say that somebody is direct and they've upset someone, but I feel like rude implies intention.
Yeah.
So as we're talking, I've got a picture of my my dad and my grandma on my desk, and my grandma had a bit of a reputation for being tactless. I don't know if she had that reputation with my dad's side of the family, but certainly I think my mum thought she was tactless. Anyway, well, and she was. Well, I shall go on. So I remember being. I think I must have been in year 6 at school. So I would have been 11 years old. I think it was probably after we'd been to Disney World. So my mum won a competition and we got to go to Disney World, and they had like buffet breakfast. It was insane. We had donuts for breakfast. It was like eat all you want, like junk food everywhere. So I gained weight over the time that I was there. So we went shopping after, I'm sure it must have been afterwards. And I'd grown out of the children's sizes and into women's sizes. And I pulled on a pair of shorts and they were too tight. And I just remember her, I don't think she physically poked me in the side, but she certainly made some comment about my weight. And I was a bit chubby. But yeah, I remember feeling a sting of it. But I think I also knew that she didn't, there was no, she wasn't intending to hurt me. And I still, when I'm thinking about it now, I feel a little bit like towards my younger self, and like wanting to say to my grandma, like, that's not very kind. But I also don't feel negatively towards my grandma. I see it as she was just pointing something out. And actually my dad did something similar. So this was quite late on. It was only a couple of months before he died. He had early onset Alzheimer's. But he just looked at me and he went, "You've put on some pounds, haven't you?" And it was true. And I had.
Hmm.
And again, again, there's context here. He had Alzheimer's. He'd kind of perhaps lost. I don't think he would have. I don't know. Maybe he would have said something before he got ill. I don't know. But yeah, I think I do think there's really something there about intention. If you're going to call someone rude, I think that's really important, actually. That because I think people who are autistic, I feel like it's quite a common experience to be positioned as rude, and that actually when you can adjust your lenses, if you like, to understand how autistic people work, you can see that it isn't rudeness. And I think that's really important, because being positioned as rude when you're not being rude, that doesn't mean that the autistic person should just be left to communicate however they like, because I think there is something about social cohesion that's important for everybody.
Hmm.
So it's not about inviting autistic people to mask and communicate in a neurotypical way. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting a bit tangled up in what I'm trying to say here. But yeah, I think there is something, an important separation. I think it's not okay to position someone as rude if their intention is not to be rude. That at that point there should be more curiosity. If your manager
Yeah.
had come to you, or the other person had come to you and said, "Can I just check, what did you mean by this email? Because what I've heard in it is, I feel like you're trying to dictate to me, but we're on the same level." That would give
Hmm.
you the opportunity to say, like, "Oh, that isn't what I meant," or however you would want to respond to that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great example of why I was so stunned that they just didn't come to me in the first place, because that gives people the ability to explain where they were coming from, or what they meant. So even if something is seen as being rude, I do agree with you. I think intent really matters. And so if somebody gets curious about something they've perceived as being rude, and then the person says, "Oh, that wasn't my intention, I was just coming at it from this perspective," then that really helps both parties. Where if someone's just accused of being rude when that wasn't their intention, it comes back to being chronically misunderstood again.
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't my intention. Nobody gets me. Nobody understands me, which, as we now know, being chronically misunderstood, leads to trauma. It's a form of trauma when it happens enough times.
Yeah.
So there's just a way that we can approach it. And I feel like there's a difference between things that seem a bit rude versus that was rude.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's hard to put into words, but perhaps again, that comes down to intent. I do think there are some things that are just quite obviously rude. And then others that are subjective, and others that you could just take that with a pinch of salt, probably wasn't their intention.
Yeah. It does feel tricky. Like, where my mind goes to is about fatness. So that's been a big part of my story. Gaining weight, losing weight, gaining it again. And I feel like a lot of people would agree that to describe someone as fat is rude. I feel like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people would say that. Like, you would never go up to somebody and say, "Oh, you're fat," or "Here's my
Mm-hmm.
fat friend." You wouldn't do
Yeah.
that. But actually, as part of the body image work that I've done over the years, to me, fat is a neutral descriptor.
Mm.
But again, I suppose there's nuance in it, because if somebody was being rude, so I had an experience a few years ago, so it must be about 5 years ago. I made a mistake while I was driving. It was a really, it was one of those ones where someone has priority if they're going a certain way, but I'd missed the sign. So I thought it was my right of way, and it wasn't. And the guy, I think, was also going quite fast, swerved around me, wound down his window and went, "You stupid fat whatever." And that really shook me, because it was the first time in a long time that someone had used fat in a malicious way.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think about having little children and they just say it how it is. So when they were younger, one of my children would come up to me and go, "Oh, I love your fat belly," or something like that, and wobble it around. I'd just be like, "Yeah, it is, isn't it? It wiggles and it jiggles." And so I think context matters. I
Yeah.
do
And
think,
intent again.
yeah, that it matters. I think, so. Another example that's popped into my head is the N word. I would never use it. I would never use it. But some people have reclaimed it and use it in a way that feels appropriate for them. But in some circumstances, it is absolutely not okay. like most
Yeah.
circumstances, I would say, unless
Mm.
if you're using it for yourself.
Oh, and it's similar
Yeah.
with the word queer.
Right. Yeah.
There are many words that people have reclaimed and
Yeah.
reclaimed the meaning of. And yeah, fat is another one
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But fat in itself being a neutral word
Yeah.
and times where you can use it in a neutral way, like the horrible description of the car driver who I want to hunt down, by the way. You can also turn it to then use it maliciously as an insult, as a put down. Yeah, it comes back down to intent and context. And yeah, those are where I believe that so many people who relate to being called blunt and rude
Yeah.
aren't blunt or rude.
Yeah.
Just, I just don't think there are. Even if there's little moments of it,
Mhm.
it's still a different form of communication.
Yeah.
There are going to be some people who, I don't know, classic example of someone saying, "Oh, do you like my new top?" There are always going to be some people who don't want the honest thing and just want people to say whatever. "Oh, yeah, yeah, it's great. It looks great." And they're just happy with that, even not knowing if that's what people think.
Yeah.
And there are other people who want the truth, who would want someone to say, "Oh my God, that top doesn't suit you at all. What are you doing? Get it off." Where
Yeah.
they wouldn't get upset by that, where they might find that funny and be like, "Oh, am I really? Oh, I quite liked it." They're like, "No, I hate it." And they might go,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, I like it, so I'll
Yeah.
wear it."
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? I feel like I've said that about 3 times now. I'm just thinking about a group I'm in, and someone had posted their Christmas nails and said, "Oh, I just asked my mum if she liked my nails, and she said no." And I just feel torn because there's part of me that's like, yeah, sometimes it would just be nice if the person would just say, "Oh yeah, they're really nice," even if they wouldn't have chosen those nails or don't really like those nails on you. If you're really excited about your nails, it can be a bit of a drop, can't it? To be like, "Oh, well, I like them," and then you maybe look at them a bit differently and like, "Oh, maybe they're not that nice." But then another part of me that was like, a bit like with my daughter on the stairs saying, "You're annoying me," just feels like, well, she's just letting you know that she doesn't like them.
Yeah, and when you ask the question, you're inviting an opinion for
Yeah.
someone to tell you the truth. Otherwise, what's the point in asking someone, "Do you like my nails?"
See, I think I find this quite confusing in social interactions in general,
Mm.
because when I ask a question, I want an honest answer. Even if I struggle with it, I asked my sister a question on Tuesday and she gave me an answer I didn't like. And so I went on to justify all the ways that was right. Yeah, when I ask a question, I want an honest answer, even if I don't like it. I find it really confusing when people ask questions and they just want a soothing answer or they just want to feel better.
They already asked the question with a specific answer in mind, is what they want you to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. What they're saying is reassure me,
Yeah.
not tell me your opinion. I find that really confusing. And then sometimes I think, is that okay though? Because then surely that means people know that I'm a good person to come to if you want an honest answer about things.
Hmm.
And maybe you have other friends to go to if you want a fluffy answer or a reassuring answer. That actually I'm more likely to say what I really feel. And that's a value in itself.
Yeah.
And I'm sat here thinking, like, oh, maybe I should be better at giving fluffy answers, but I wouldn't want fluffy answer friends. I want
Hmm.
straight answer friends.
Yeah. Just tell me truthfully. And I still think there's a way in which you can deliver the truth,
Yeah.
which may be where you can be truthful and direct without being abrupt,
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, another piece of research I came across that I found interesting, it was research on social perception shows that people interpret tone through their own emotional filters, not just words. And I
Right.
find that really interesting because there's many times when I take an issue with a person's tone and where you say it's not what you said or it's how you said it or you said it like this.
Yeah.
And in your mind, that is how it was said.
Yeah.
And you infer meaning for how it was said. Whereas then the other person might say, well, that's not how I meant it. Or what tone? I don't think I spoke in a tone.
Yeah.
And actually, the research showed that It's not a fixed thing, that it is half in the speaker and it is half in the listener. And whilst there are some things that are a bit more universal, such as how loud someone's voice is or how soft someone's voice is, how it feels does depend on who's hearing it and what state they're in as they hear it, which I found interesting because I don't know about you, but when I just hear tone, it's like, no, but that is how you said it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, that's one of the things that I've been learning to check out or trying to check out. I feel like my husband would say, no, you don't. But yeah, I've been trying to get better at saying, what did you mean? Yeah. How did you mean that? Or did you know that felt XYZ? Did you mean it like that? And checking that out. I know I am hypersensitive to some tone things. I know that, that's because of my history. I will be really aware of that. And some ways in a not helpful way as well.
Right.
So I'll go away from things feeling like, oh, well, they obviously didn't like me because of X, Y, Z. And then actually it turns out it was nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
So the way that I see that is about responsibility, that I need to take responsibility for my history impacting my filter, but not easy. Really not easy to do. Really not easy to do.
No.
And if I'm being honest and kind of realistic with myself, it's probably more like I'll react to it in the moment and then I'll go away and think about it and then maybe need to apologize or say, maybe I took that in a different way but I don't, again, I think it's really important to not then for the, for the person that's speaking to be like, well, I didn't mean it that way. Like that good relationships require both people taking ownership of their part or taking ownership of their impact. Like I don't mind apologizing for something if I didn't mean it that way. Like I will happily say, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it that way. Even if I think the other person has some responsibility to own that they've heard it in some way that I didn't actually imply. Because I think there's just something smoothing about that I've said something, it has impacted in a way I didn't mean. And I'm sorry about that. I think sometimes I think of sorry as like sorrowful as well. Like, oh, I'm sad about that with you, is what I mean when I say sorry sometimes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a difference between apologizing for impact versus apologizing as oh, yep, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
That's where there can be a helpful and healthy difference.
Yeah.
Where we can apologize for the impact of something, even if we've not done that thing wrong as such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really good episode of a podcast. It's Brené Brown and I think it's Harriet Lerner, where she talks through how to apologize well. And it covers some of this stuff. I don't know if it's specifically apologizing for impact, but yeah, how to apologize well, which I can put that in the show notes. Yeah. I think this episode has felt way trickier to talk about than I anticipated that it would. It just feels like there's so many, like every time I go to say something, I feel like I'm tripping over myself with a different perspective in my mind. That there are definitely parts of me that are like, being direct is a good thing. And I feel like I've not quite got that across as much as I would have wanted to in this episode. Like I really do think that being direct is a good and important thing. When it comes to power, I think there's so many, whether that's big power, like the state having power over the people, or whether it's like micro power in a relationship. I think there's so much damage done by power that could be changed if more people were direct and not afraid to be direct. I think that's really important. And I also think it's really important to be as kind as you can. I think that's one of the things that I've really learned since being a therapist, because we have to challenge a lot of the time. You can't be a people pleaser as a therapist. That's not what people are paying for, right? They're paying for you to be honest with them. So you have to develop a skill of being able to say difficult things in a gentle way, in a kind way, in a caring way. And I think that you can say, I don't like to use absolutes, but I think you can say anything in a kind way if you put your mind to it. That's not to say that it's humanly possible to always be kind about things, because
Sure.
there are going to be times where you're tired, you're angry, you've sort of lost your patience, and you say something where you don't mean it. Again, there's that kind of black and white thinking in my mind, because I know if I heard that, I'd leave this episode feeling like, right, well, I should never say anything mean ever again. Well, I intend to be mean, but yeah, I really think it is possible to say painful things in a kind way. I've just got pictures in my mind of people that have been really mean to me about things that I maybe did need to grow in those areas, but they said it in a mean way, and actually it set me back
Yeah.
because it just made me feel defensive. And actually, if they'd been able to say the thing in a gentle way, that I would have been able to grow quicker. But also, they were just being mean. Yeah.
Well, that's it, isn't it? With listening to you talk about that, it's what is the difference between being kind honest versus being brutally honest?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is where there's a quote in my mind, and I can't recall where it comes from, but it's honesty without compassion is cruelty. And I wonder if if that's part of this, where you can be honest, blunt, direct, to the point. If it comes with compassion alongside,
Yeah.
that's one thing. If it comes with no compassion or like intent that we were talking about before, then you're stepping into the realms of being cruel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's perhaps being able to figure out or know for ourselves where our personal comfortable line is
Yeah.
with the bluntness and the abruptness versus when it steps into cruelty and being brutally honest. And all of our lines might be in different places. And if someone's line is further over, well, that's fine. If you're okay with the consequences
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
If you're not okay with the consequences of that, then maybe you need to redraw your line.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes up in relation to honesty and other people, sometimes it's not about being honest versus not being honest. Sometimes it's about timing. So if you're really clued in to your friend, your partner, your family member, you might know that there's a truth that they need to hear. But you also might recognize that they're not in a place where they can hear that truth yet. And then we might decide to wait until a moment reveals themselves that feels more appropriate, where we feel like that person might be able to hear that truth. Because it might be something that they really need to hear. But if it's not said at the right time, they're not going to hear it anyway.
Yeah.
But again, something else that can be tricky to judge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing I'm really taking away from this episode is that there isn't a right answer. Like so many things, we just have to find some way to live that feels right for us and works with the people that we want to keep in our life.
Yeah. And like you said before, valuing our directness.
Yeah.
Knowing that there is a place in society for direct people and that we need people to have all sorts of different communication styles and the way of dealing with things.
Yeah.
And that I think there is real beauty in authentic communication.
Yeah.
And I've said a few quotes today, but there is another one that I've come across that I want to give to people as a parting gift. But it's also recognizing honesty as an act of self-trust that says, I can handle the truth of who I am.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
If you've ever felt like your honesty costs you connection, remember the right people won't need you to water yourself down.
They'll thank you for being real, even when it's uncomfortable.
So maybe you're not too honest for your own good. Maybe you've just outgrown the spaces that can't hold honesty.
Next time, we're diving into Too Busy to Have Fun for the overworkers, exploring the difference between being productive and being present, and why downtime triggers more anxiety than another task on your to-do list.
But for now, we'll leave you with this question. What would it look like to stop apologizing for your honesty and start seeing it as a form of care?
That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.